What is up, Cough Country? Welcome back. It's Steve with your cannabis news. Oh, you're so excited to be here. I can tell. I can see the glint in your eye. I'm pumped too. You can tell I got the energy going. We're going to fill those minds with the news of the day, and we're going to get into that right now. Snoop Dogg is back in the news, believe it or not, and it's not for what he did online, but for what he's selling online. A little bit weird. I don't know how I feel about it, but I'm going to tell you what it is in case you want to throw in a bid. And after that, we're going to go over to Florida where Ron DeSantis, there's rumors swirling that this guy is about to veto a bill that would ban hemp-derived cannabinoids. We're talking about THCA, Delta-8. Why would DeSantis ban? Why would he do that? He wants that banned. We're going to crack into his head, figure out what's going on there. Then we go over to South Dakota, where South Dakotans are very excited. They are going popular ballot. They're going to decide if they want recreational marijuana, but there might be some roadblocks in the way. We're going to jump in there. Then we go across the world to South Africa, where they have finally legalized cannabis, one of the few African nations to do it, and it took them quite a long time to get there. We'll break down that whole process. And then after that, we're going into the science. The science is having its say, and apparently cannabis terpenes are doing a really good job at managing pain. It's blowing minds, and we're going to kind of get into that, figure out why that is happening. And finally, we are rounding out with the strains of yesterday, where we check out the legends of cannabis that brought us all the way to now, and we're going all the way back. I'm talking the origins of cannabis, where we're talking Afghan Kush, that sweet black Afghani. We're getting into that. All that's happening right now on Cough Country News. Stick around. It's all coming up right now. Yeah.
No sticks, no seeds, just news.
All right, guys, welcome. All right, let's get into the news. You ready for it? Are you ready? I can tell you're ready. So we're talking about Snoop Dogg. He found his way back into the news, and ladies and gentlemen, who's out there saying that we live in a world where dreams don't come true, huh? If you go online right now, you could own your very own blunt that was smoked by the dog father himself, Snoop Doggy Dogg, but it might cost you, okay? So Snoop Dogg is online. He's selling a half-smoked blunt as an online memorabilia auction. He's calling the Shiznit, right? So he's doing this in collaboration with the online marketplace, The Realist. And it's not just a blunt in a bag. Oh, no. Guys, they're being nice about it, okay? It's preserved in resin in Snoop Dogg's own personal ashtray for you to display for all eternity, or so says the website here. Now, most of you might be saying to yourself, no, that doesn't sound dumb at all. I'm all about it. I want that blunt that I can't smoke. But Steve, is it authentic? How do I know that Snoop Dogg really smoked this thing? If I can't DNA test it, who's to say? Who's to say, right? Well, rest easy, my friendly auctioneers, because the Gin and Juice rapper smoked this thing in front of an official authenticator earlier in the year. There's a video and everything. It's all in the proof. And as of right now, if you go on right now, the half-smoked blunt is going for a little over $2,000, which, you know, not too bad considering this is Snoop's first roach he ever tried to sell. Who knows, maybe he's tapping into a market here. But luckily for us, there's more in the Shiznit auction than just half-burnt weed. But it is running a pretty penny, apparently. So he's selling a LA Lakers 2001 championship leather jacket designed by Jeff Hamilton. Ooh la la. It's going for a little over $5,000. He's got a Death Row Records chain and a box signed by Snoop himself, a little over $6,000. And, you know, the various recordings, tour memorabilia. He's even selling his used 1989 Nintendo Game Boy, a well-loved item from back before he was famous. Isn't that so sweet? You can own a little piece of Snoop right there. So the website keeps going on and on about artists finding new revenue streams in this digital music era. But so if you want to go on, help keep Snoop out of the poorhouse and be forever explaining to dinner guests why you have a preserved half-smoked blunt, you have until June 16th to make a bid. And who knows, maybe you might get it. Maybe dreams really do come true. I'm rooting for you guys. I'm rooting for you. So then we're going over to Florida, guys, where reports keep swirling here that Ron DeSantis, governor of Florida, an ardent opponent of legal marijuana, is looking to veto a bill that might ban consumable hemp products. We're talking like Delta-8, hemp-derived THCA. things like that. Now, this might sound like it makes no sense. It has no reason whatsoever. But if you look into it, Ron DeSantis and the Florida Republican Party have come out as 100% opposed to legalization of marijuana. And this is right after Florida voters put the Amendment 3 on the popular ballot. So they're going to be voting for that themselves in November, going around the government to decide legal cannabis. And DeSantis and the Republicans keep going on about the whole state smelling like weed. Quality of life is going to go down. Tourism's going to get hit. He's not hiding that he is not a fan of cannabis over here. So he has the chance. He's sitting there. He's looking at the bill. He has the chance to ban intoxicating cannabinoids that are completely legal. There's nothing he can do about it, not being taxed, not being regulated. But he passes on that chance to veto the bill. So what gives here? This sounds like it's not making any sense. Well, if you look into it, like we covered last week, there is a civil war going on in cannabis that nobody's really talking about here. And it looks like Florida might be one of the battlefronts of this war. So legal businesses are just as anti-hemp-derived cannabinoids as government officials are. So Delta-8, THCA, these are all legal through this little loophole in the 2018 Farm Bill, right? That legalized CBD, so they're accidentally legal. So these products can be sold everywhere that marijuana is illegal. And where marijuana is okay, these products are way cheaper because they're not being regulated, not being taxed. So legal companies who are selling state legal hemp cannot compete, and they are pissed off, and they are looking to ban it just as much as marijuana prohibitionists are, and they are coming together to do it. So it looks like Ron DeSantis might be trying to leverage this little feud going on in cannabis, right? So he does want to ban these hemp-derived cannabinoids. He wants them off the table. But what he wants more is he wants marijuana legalization to just go away. He really doesn't like that, not about that at all. But marijuana legalization is on a popular ballot. It's going to the polls. So if the people vote yes, there's really not much this guy's going to be able to do about it. So he and the Republicans are gearing up to start off a campaign that is going to stop marijuana legalization in its tracks and convince people to vote no. So DeSantis is here thinking that, hey, if I veto this bill, if I keep these hemp companies in business selling Delta-8, selling THCA, undercutting the legal marijuana market, all these hemp businesses are going to rally to my cause and help me defeat the legal marijuana industry and the legalization initiative. So it might sound like a contradictory thing going on, but there's some pretty shrewd politics going on here. An insider even said, quote, "It doesn't make sense unless what you're looking for is money from the hemp industry." Oh, okay. And it's also pretty evident that leadership in the Florida Republican Party has pretty close ties to the hemp industry, so it's in their interest to keep them going as well. So we will see if a veto happens, and then we'll see if the gamble pays off. But there are more rounds to come in this fight that is going to keep unfolding as we get closer to those November elections. All right, guys, don't go anywhere. We're going to be right back. We got a little message from our sponsor. Keep those cannabis businesses going. Exactly what we're talking about. We're going to be back with more news in just a second. Don't go anywhere.
Let us go get high.
I'm Rob Cantrell, and you're watching Cough Country TV. Right here, right now. This is it. You're watching it. Cough Country. You're in this country, cough it up. Cough it up for Cough Country TV. Right here, right now, on the internet and beyond. Media, television, pizza, weed, legalized.
Thanks for sticking around, guys. Look at you to reward you for your patience. We got more news. I'm excited about it, and I've got great news for you today. South Dakotans, the voters in South Dakota, are going to have the chance for themselves to vote for themselves, just like they did in Ohio, just like voters did in Florida, just like they did in Missouri and Maryland and 12 other states. They get to decide for themselves whether they want legal cannabis in their state. So when activists in South Dakota have finally gathered enough signatures to place the marijuana initiative, the legalization initiative, on the ballot in November. So they're going to be voting on Measure 29, and they're going to tell the government in November if they need to change gears and start putting laws in place to govern legal recreational marijuana. But this isn't like it's South Dakota's first rodeo, guys. No. They've been here before. In fact, organizers who were getting the signatures were having trouble with people because everybody thought they had already signed the signature drive. Now, back in 2020, right, believe it or not, they actually did pass, by popular vote, recreational marijuana. But the court struck it down. They said the whole thing was way too broad, so they just went with straight medical marijuana instead. Not a bad trade. Okay, I get it. We'll circle back. And they did in 2022. It was on the ballot again, but this time voters voted no. So here we are in 2024 trying to ride this pony again, and without any support from the national cannabis industry, and with polls saying that 51% of voters are probably going to vote against Measure 29, they pushed ahead, they got the signatures, and we're going to figure it out in November of 2024. But just like in Ohio, it looks like the government might be poking its nose where it shouldn't be. So back in 2020, when everybody voted and what they wound up getting was medical cannabis, and they lost recreational, the governor stepped in and did everything they could to delay the program for as long as they could before it actually even started. Now, when that fell apart and it went ahead anyway, they tried to reduce the size of this program as much as they could. And then in 2022, a government-funded study, a study they funded, said, yes, you guys should legalize marijuana, but the legislators voted it down anyway because they didn't want to do it. And then a signature drive put that question right back on the ballot anyway. So we're going to see what's going to happen. Does South Dakota actually want legal cannabis? And if it says yes, is the government actually going to support them, or are they just going to get in the way? But regardless, the people are going to get a chance to speak for themselves, which I think is a wonderful thing. Now, speaking of Souths, we're going to cross the Atlantic Ocean all the way to South Africa, where, yes, South Africa has finally legalized cannabis. President Cyril Ramaphosa has signed a bill that legalizes the possession and cultivation of cannabis use among adults. So South Africa has joined the League of Cannabis-Loving Nations when the president signed the Cannabis for Private Persons Act into law one day before the national elections. So that's still panning out. We're going to see how that went for him. Hopefully that panned out well for him. So they are basically going to take cannabis off of their version of the controlled substance scheduling system, but they're not going to put a legal market into place. Oh, no. So possession and consumption, that's cool, but it looks like you're going to have to grow your own, guys. No selling in South Africa, unfortunately. But a lot of people in the government, a lot of cannabis activists, they're hoping this is just going to be a baby step. You know, get people over that hump of prohibition, and the next legal thing will be sales. At least that's what they're hoping, because it took so long to even get here. Now, back in 2018, we're talking 6 years ago, a South African court decided that possession and cultivation were not against the law, and that the government had 2 years. Guys, we give you 2 years, fix the laws, change this, make this right. Now, 2 years later, in 2020, they actually had a bill ready on time to go. But for one reason or another, I couldn't figure out why, here we are in 2024, just signing it now, right? So South Africa has been the home to the apartheid movement from 1948 all the way to 1994, where the all-white government enacted policies that effectively segregated their society along racial lines. And just like in other racially charged places in the world, the U.S., cannabis, or daga as the locals call it, found itself right in the middle of the argument. Now, South Africans have been cultivating hemp for centuries. They've been doing it for a very, very long time. But the British started losing their mind in the 1800s, late 1800s, when they were bringing Indian workers over, obviously from India, and they were smoking their Indian hemp. And they said this made them absolutely useless for work, and they immediately classified cannabis as a poison. In fact, this is one of the first instances of cannabis prohibition being used as racial discrimination funny enough. Look at that. And South African government, another little fun fact here, the South African government is one of the reasons that the League of Nations banned international cannabis sales, but at the same time they banned opium back in the 20s. It was the South African government that got them to do that. So thanks a lot, South Africa. Appreciate you. So back in 1952, right, apartheid movement was just getting going. There was a big government report that came out on daga, or marijuana. This is one of those things that had really no science to it, but absolutely trashed marijuana and all the ethnicities, all the religions that actually used it. And this kind of set the stage for a really big crackdown going on in the country. So when Nixon launched his war on drugs back in 1971, South Africa immediately followed suit, and they came out with the Abuse of Dependence Producing Substances and Rehabilitation Centers Act of 1971. That was their big War on Drugs Act. And in the first 2 years of that being implemented, over 77,000 people were arrested. And you guessed it, almost all of them were young black males. And 20 years later, actually, some people consider the Drugs and Drug Trafficking Act of 1992, 20 years later, that expanded on those very same policies that were in play the whole time, was one of the last laws of apartheid that was actually passed before apartheid came crashing down. Guys, don't go anywhere. We got one more word from our sponsor. Then we're going to get back into the science, the strains of yesterday. Lots of still cool news still coming up. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with more.
Yo, this is Lord Digger the Heisman, and you're watching Cough Country TV. If you ain't coughing, it ain't doing too much to your lungs, man. You got to cough, man. You got to get them capillaries to bust open.
I'm Rob Cantrell, and you're watching Cough Country TV. Right here, right now. This is it. You're watching it. Cough Country. You're in this country, cough it up. Cough it up for Cough Country TV. Right here, right now, on the internet and beyond. Media, television, pizza, weed, legalized.
This is a flower, and this is a distraction. But while the distraction might grab your attention, it will never change the fact that this is medicine.
What up, players? Welcome back, guys. Cough Country News is back at you. Of course, you're back in Cough Country, and we've got more news coming at you. We're jumping into the science this time. So a federally funded study said that terpenes of cannabis, not the cannabinoids, not the THC, not the CBD, but the terpenes themselves may be useful in managing chronic pain. So in fact, during the study, they did such a good job at managing pain that they were compared to morphine's effectiveness, just without the side effects of the opioids. And in fact, when they combined the two of them, whoa boy, they had, it was way more effective. Super impressive. The scientific paper said that the scientists took a handful of cannabinoids, or took a handful of terpenes that were common in cannabis, and tested them all individually in mice, next to a test of morphine, just for comparison, and they found out they were both just as effective at managing peripheral neuropathic pain, just like you get with chemo drugs and chemotherapy, as well as regular old inflammatory pain. And together, when you put them together, they were able to lower the doses of each one in order to produce way greater effects, kind of that entourage effect coming in. One of the authors of the paper said, quote, "This brings up the idea that you could have a combination therapy of opioids with high level of terpenes, which could actually make pain relief better while blocking the addiction potential of the opioids." Now, terpenes are present in all sorts of things. They're all over nature. So why is it that we're talking about cannabis here? You know, why specifically cannabis? Well, the study kind of addresses that. They say that most things in nature only really have two dominant terpenes going on really at any one time. But cannabis can have over 150 terpenes active at the same time, with multiple of them in dominant proportions all at the same time. So you've got a lot more cannabinoid activity. And they even say that those unique combinations of those terpenes are definitely a reason that you get differing effects from different strains, right? And I just want to say sorry to my vapors out there, but the research did say that the only way to really get this effect out of those terpenes is to inject it subdermally. You got to inject it in under the skin. Funny enough, they gave the mice edibles and vapes thinking that something was going to happen, but absolutely nothing. They got no results. It was totally ineffective. Which isn't interesting because there's so many ancillary responses, ancillary reports that people say they're coming in talking about the pain-relieving effects of different cannabis strains. So the scientists actually affected there was going to be something more going on with the vapes and edibles, but nothing. It's almost like a TV episode that's like a cliffhanger. It just leaves you with more questions. I want more answers, but got none for you yet. Then we're going over, guys, we're hitting the strains of yesterday again, and we're checking out the cannabis strains, the legends of cannabis that have brought cannabis culture to where it is today, and we're looking back, way back to the origins of cannabis, going to the oldest strains, the badassest of strains, Afghan Kush, that sweet, sweet black Afghani. We're jumping into that. So a lot of people say that cannabis originated in the Indus Valley, right? Home to the Hindu Kush mountains that border Afghanistan and Pakistan. They separate the two. So Afghanis have been taking care of cannabis for a very, very long time, at least since the 7th century BC, where we know Kush started getting its genetics. And ever since, Kush has been synonymous with some of the best weed in the world. In fact, there's an old Afghani legend that says God's emissary, Baba Ku, the healer, he came to Afghanistan with hemp seeds and showed them how to grow cannabis and make hashish. And it kind of makes sense that this all came from a healer, right? Because the Afghan strains are very unique among kind of the land races of the world. They're one of the few that lean with these indica properties, these strong, heavy, deep, high, that medicinal properties. Most of the rest of these land race strains in the world are equatorial tropical sativa strains with very, very, very different things going on there. So Afghanistan has been known as the producer of some of the finest hash in the world for a very long time. They've had that reputation since before Marco Polo traveled the Silk Road through the area back in his day. They were one of the first to come up with the dry sift technique for making hash, a way cleaner, way more efficient option than what everybody else was doing at the time. They were just rubbing it on their hands, get the resin on their hands and just peeling it off. So ever since then, the name Afghan hash has been the cream of the crop of the world. And for the longest time, Afghanistan cannabis, those strains, were simply just called hash plants. That just was their name, hash plants. Now, cannabis was outlawed back in 1957 in Afghanistan. And by the 70s, when Nixon was launching his war on drugs, the Afghan government was also leading a crackdown on cannabis in Afghanistan. But by that time, the West had already discovered the sweet Afghan Kush from the people bringing it back from the hippie trail back in the 50s and 60s. So when all these other native phenotypes were all being discovered in the West. So the demand was really, really high by the time the Soviets invaded the country back in the 1980s, displacing a large portion of the population, including cannabis farmers. But interestingly enough, the war wound up freeing up a lot of the farmland that the government had turned away from cannabis, and kind of in the rebuilding period, in that post-invasion period, a lot of those fields returned to cannabis production and brought that black Afghan weed, that Afghan hash, all back to the Western world. Now, most native strains, we're talking land-race strains, original strains that people were bringing back to the U.S., to Europe, they were all sativa-based strains. We call them equatorial sativas, right? Now, Afghan strains, they brought a whole new genetics to the table. So growers and breeders, they heavily valued Afghani weed because of its indica properties. It's the high THC production, heavy resin production, shorter, bushier profile. It had a shorter growing period, too. So a lot of these tropical sativas, they grow for 16 weeks before they grow to maturity. They're growing to 20 feet tall. if you're growing in North America, if you're growing in Europe, that is not really conducive to its shorter growing season. And they're also growing in governments that are driving the growers, the breeders, underground and indoors. So those Afghan strains, they're only taking 6 to 8 weeks to mature, and they're only growing like 6 feet tall, something like that. So it's much more conducive to indoor and temperate climates, and those buds are absolutely packed on that plant, so you're not losing production. Now, and breeders, because breeders were crossing those tropical sativas with those Kush genetics, that's what allowed cannabis to be grown in North America all the way to Canada, even to Alaska. So that's kind of what allowed growers to open up in the West. And Kush genetics are so prized that you're still going to find straight Afghani all over the place today. It's not a hard one to find. That heavy THC, those relaxed couch lock vibes, those big medicinal properties mean an insane number of strains have borrowed from Afghan genetics. Most indica today, in fact, if you find indica today, you probably can look back and find Afghan breeding in its crossbreeding if you go back. And many winners of the High Times Cannabis Cup, any other cannabis awards, cannabis competitions, they all have Afghan genetics to thank for those wins. So if you want to go out there and sample some Afghani today, you're probably going to be able to find it. But if you want those blends, look for AK-47, Skunk Number 1. That's an OG strain right there. Cheese, Northern Lights. There's way too many other ones to name here. But if you ever tasted that Afghani back in the day when it was original, when they were bringing it back from Afghanistan, even if you tasted it today, let me know. I want to know what you had, what you tried, what you felt about it. Tell me about it in the comments, guys. All right, guys, thanks so much for checking us out. That's been Cough Country News, coming to you every week with all the happenings going on in your world. Be sure you like, subscribe, tell a friend, get them in on all this cannabis news goodness. And I will see you next time on Cough Country News, where it's always no sticks, no seeds, just news, baby. You heard it right. I know you said it at home. Just news in Cough Country. See you next time.
No sticks, no seeds, just news.